Now it's time to review some of the headlines of today's newspapers.
All right, thank you so much for that. I'll do the honors. Mr. Efeni, your fellow Malabite, can't make it here today. I will just go on a couple of stories making the rounds. I think one of the biggest ones we've talked about is FG lifts ban on interstate travels, open schools for graduating students. And it further says here, extends ease of lockdown by 4 weeks. Churches, mosques, open bars, nightclub, spas, gyms remain closed. Nationwide curfew stays. COVID-19 case rise by 566 to 25,133, with 9,402 discharged, 573 dead. But this is a rebuttal here. It is suicidal to reopen schools. That's what ASU is warning. I mean, what's your take on this?
Well, looking inside page 9, ASU is saying the government must make resources available in order for schools to meet proposed conditions set by the Federal Ministry of Education. So that was kind of qualified, that dramatic language of it's suicidal, was qualified, that if resources are made available, like hand washing and what have you, face masks, then it'll be okay. So it's qualified there, I have to stress that. I see nothing wrong with opening schools only to graduating classes. It's not a blanket school reopening like we saw in South Africa, like we saw in Israel, where schools had to be closed again because of a spike in COVID-19 infections. In France, they had schools reopen, but there was a very strict rota. You didn't have all the children at school at the same time, which is similar to what has been proposed here. And they did not suffer any setbacks. So it can be done responsibly. Because we have to remember that poor grades at crucial points in your life do affect your prospects. And that is it. We must remember that. So these things have to be balanced. And I support the fact that the federal government is attempting to do that.
Dr. Abati, my little, problem with this has always been, how do we implement in the hinterlands? Take, for instance, a government secondary school in Ikotekpene. How do you get water? How do you get social distancing guidelines? How do you get everything?
Well, that's why we say that, look, there has to be proper guidelines articulated. The Minister of State for Education at a point had cause to outline those non-pharmaceutical interventions that will be of relevance to schools. But that has to be cascaded down to the level of the states. And the states must also see that they have a responsibility in this regard. And the school authorities as well, particularly owners of private schools that may have the resource. If ASU is saying that the federal government should make the resources available, how? Much of it will be basic things about taking responsibility, wearing masks, changing the seating arrangement in the classes, ensuring that there's no overcrowding, educating the students themselves about the risks that they run. However, the schools are being reopened, particularly for graduating students, because you will recall that many parents and even the students themselves have been expressing concern. They've been asking such questions. When would JSS 3 exam be held? When would the session end formally in terms of the writing of if not any other exam, at least the SCUSAT, or what they call the WAEC exams. So what, the government has tried to do is to just clean up the school calendar as quickly as possible. But I think now that the federal government, the Presidential Task Force, is proposing these measures, now is the time to place that proper emphasis on the point that Boss Mustafa has always made about the need for people to take responsibility. The only fear is that young people, sometimes, they've been on forced holiday now since March. When they see each other back in the classroom again, who is going to enforce that physical distancing? Because they are also at a stage in their lives where, they like to bond together. And social distancing may not be the best thing. But vigilance is what is required. In Israel, schools were reopened. And when it was discovered that, the numbers were going up, particularly among students and their teachers, they had to close down the schools again. So this should not be an open-ended thing. It shouldn't be given. There must be a monitoring system in place. And it could be just for a very short period. complete the syllabus as quickly as possible, and then let them write the exams.
Yes, because if Dr. Ghebreyesus of the WHO is saying that we haven't even reached the end of this, we're nowhere near the end of the tunnel, life has to go on. So we have to find a way around it.
I mean, if they had opened the university, I'm sure most university students will be used to semester is short. So that's a wrap up semester.
Because preferred by Nigerian university students who want to get out of the school as quickly as possible.
They are acclimatized to long strikes.
That's so sad.
APC interim panel to visit Tinubu begs members to withdraw suits. Giedom hands over to Buni, commends Buhari for saving ruling party. I mean, let's take a couple of other papers. That's from The Punch. Daily Independent is saying it's suicidal reopening schools. ASU tells FG. That's from the Daily Independent. And Buhari Olubadan, Makinde, mourn business mogul, Bode Akindele. That's another story making the rounds on The Punch. Again, AGF, Army refused to produce killer soldiers as Wadume trial begins. I mean, you want to comment on that? Because it looks as though to me that some people are Teflons in this country. The Wadume case comes to mind. We saw the circumstances, you know, for his release at first, that some soldiers did kill top police officers, you know, very highly coveted police officers in this country. And that case has dragged on and on and on and on. Somebody will think that if there's a case for dispensation of justice, it should be quick. I mean,
well, part of the problem that we observed when this Wadume case came up was the crisis of lack of coordination among the various security agencies, and then what looks like rivalry among their ranks. You recall at the time the president had ordered an investigation into what exactly happened. The police arresting a kingpin, and then the soldiers, the army, giving an order that the person should be freed. It looked very untidy. And we saw one in terms of lack of coordination, problem in terms of interagency rivalry, and then lack of proper communication.
Was there complicity in all of this?
Well, that was what was suspected at the time. But then the probe was set up. You had the probe by the police. You also had the probe that was ordered by the president. But to hear that killer soldiers have not been charged to court and that it's only Wadume, I think that creates a problem for many Nigerians who follow the story and who would try to imagine that perhaps the cover-up that they suspected is what is happening.
I mean, how do you expect Nigerians to feel when, with that Wadume story, I'm juxtaposing it with this now, when the Emir of Daura is saying on the Vanguard newspaper that insecurity is now worse than civil war. And guess what? He got a chorus of, yes, you are right, by Efeni, Ohaneze, and Pandev. Emir cautions Nigerians against distracting security agencies. You have no excuse to fail, Bratais tells special forces. I mean, how do you juxtapose that? You can sense Wadume terrorized the North. Wadume, I'm sure what Wadume did, Lawrence, Omajaku Anini, and Monde Sumbo, never even did half of them.
Oh, you know, he then considered running for political office.
In fact, I think he ran.
Well,
he ran.
He did?
A word of caution here.
Yeah.
You know, Wadume is now, in court, I guess. So let the court
let the court
determine
decide.
The matter.
But how do you juxtapose it with the Dr. Abati?
Yes, but the thing, of course, is, what the MI is saying is what everybody is saying, that we have a problem of insecurity. And there are persons like the Coalition of Civil Society Groups, who I think on May 28 provided some statistics on the number of people who have died as a result of banditry, kidnapping, violence of various hues between January and May. And, the suggestion is that, look, more people have died in the course of Boko Haram and banditry and all sorts of violence than we had even during the Civil War.
But it makes sense because it's been 10 years. It's ridiculous. Civil War was 3 years. But I wanted to make a point about police brutality and the way that police officers are not convicted for their crimes. They're paraded, they might be sacked, but they're not jailed. So the police should see how it feels now that the boot is on the other foot. Literally, now that soldiers killed police officers, and it was filmed. I don't need to say allegedly because it was filmed, and nobody is being held to account. This is how the Nigerian public perceive the police as well.
All right, thank you so much, Tundun. And goodness me, the roads are bad. Lagosians are groaning. It's in the papers. That's all we have on the headlines.